Yo, what's going on, guys? It's G Miners here. This season, Wishender got a massive buff, making it go from F tier to potentially S tier. It now has intrinsic anti-barrier rounds, making it much more favorable for taking it up against champs, but honestly, that isn't even the main reason it's good. Now, it also deals more damage against champions and bosses, however, it also counts as more hits as well, and that second part is what really makes it strong. The way that super is built in game highly depends on your damage output and the number of hits you deal against enemies, which is why something like Warlock Fusion Grenade spam builds have faster super building than even running Phoenix Protocol. Tankier enemies also happen to give you the most amount of super energy in return for dealing damage, and on top of that, primary weapons give the most energy as well when compared to specials and heavies. So with Wishender now being super useful against champions, which are one of the tankiest enemies in the game, and the fact that it is a primary weapon with each bow shot counting as 3 hits means we also regen super like nuts. So with all of that going for it, I wanted to see if Wishender, a weapon that used to be completely useless, can now compete with Arbalest, which was unarguably the best anti-barrier weapon before this season. The nice part about testing these is that we can compare charge time because both do take some time to charge up, then compare how each performs against anti-barrier shields, look at DPS values because that is also super important in endgame content, and then also compare any bonuses that one has over the other. Starting with the draw time and charge time for both weapons, Wishender is known to be one of the slowest bows in the game, which has a draw time of 820. This just means it's 820 milliseconds to fully draw and fire the arrow, so that is just under 1 full second. And then Arbalest, on the other hand, has a 533 ms charge time, so this is more or less half of a second to charge and fire a shot. Now, the major thing to consider here is going to be that when you charge bows, they stay fully charged until release, and then fusions, on the other hand, fire immediately. So this will add some internal human error, but you can see here, I'm comparing the time it takes to shoot 6 shots of each, and Arbalest is going to be a clear winner in time to fire, with all 6 shots being fired in almost half the time it takes Wishender. So as far as the speed of use is concerned, Arbalest is going to be a clear winner, which actually makes a pretty big difference. As you can see here in a real GM setting, in this clip, by the time the anti-barrier formed its shield, it already started to heal before I could fully charge and shoot a shot from Wishender. Now, you can always have a shot held and ready to go, but anti-barriers don't always go shielded at consistent times, which means you could be waiting with a shot held in for a while, which is going to be downtime, or you could also just shoot half-charged shots, but again, compared to Arbalest, these are going to slow down your gameplay. Taking a look at how both perform against anti-barrier shields, on the other hand, there is really only one major thing to look for, which is that both are able to one-shot. Arbalest clearly one-shots in every circumstance. I honestly don't even think it's possible not to one-shot an anti-barrier shield, even in GMs. And then Wishender is also completely capable of doing this as well. However, the downside to Wishender is that you do need a fully charged arrow to do this, which means if you release too early, the shield will not break, so you will need to fire another shot. And obviously, that's just going to come down to human error. But in my opinion, I do still think that is another obvious case where Arbalest is a better option to run. The only thing to take into account is that Arbalest should be able to always one-shot a barrier shield because of its exotic perk that does massive amounts of damage to enemy shields, whether or not linears are ever buffed or nerfed in the future. Wishender, on the other hand, does just have enough to break a shield when fully drawn, so if bows ever do get a damage nerf or barrier shields become tankier with sandbox changes, Wishender might no longer be able to one-shot shields. When it comes to DPS, I am just going to be looking at the 1 mag values that each weapon is capable of dealing. This might not be the most accurate way to get perfect DPS values, but in most cases, I don't think you are going to be shooting more shots than what is needed to actually kill a champ. So looking at Wishender first, we hit this Lost Sector boss for 3 damage values because we are hitting 3 times here. The main damage is from the crit we hit, which is 10,751, and then surprisingly, the overpenetration damage hits for more, which is 11,367 times 2. So all in all, each shot hits for a total of 33,485 damage. If we take this and look at the time it takes to fire 6 shots, this is going to be just over 200,000 damage, and that is going to take just over 11 seconds, which is around 18.1 thousand damage per second, which is actually pretty solid for a primary weapon. Arbalest, on the other hand, deals 52,000 damage per headshot on the exact same Lost Sector boss. So if we do the exact same thing that we did for Wishender, 6 shots is going to come out to 312.5 thousand damage in total, and this takes just under 6 seconds. So our DPS comes out to 53.9 thousand damage per second. This is obviously going to be way higher. First off, it is a special weapon, so naturally it should be hitting harder than a primary. And then on top of that, linear fusion rifles are currently the best in class for damage. Just as a comparison, if you were to shoot 1 mag of Arbalest at an enemy, you would be dealing around the same amount of damage in 9 shots of Wishender. So I still consider that extremely strong for damage, considering it is a primary weapon and the fact that Wishender does have infinite ammo. But overall, I think this is definitely another win for Arbalest. The last thing to mention is going to be the differences between each weapon, because after all, they are 2 completely different exotics. Looking at Wishender first, this weapon, as I mentioned in the intro, is notoriously strong at building super energy. Just from killing this Lost Sector boss, I got a quarter of my super back, which is going to be less than a champ will give in GMs. So in situations where a build is heavily dependent on a super, I think this is actually a really strong option. A perfect example would be in situations where you might be depending on Well of Radiance to clear encounters or Grand Masters. And then second to that, since it is a primary weapon, this means you will always have ammo for anti-barriers. I personally think this really only comes into play in solo GM clears, so if you are ever running with teammates, ammo economy with a special weapon like Arbalest is going to be more than fine. All of that being said, I do think Arbalest does still have way more going for it in terms of exotic functionality. First and foremost, in any raid or master raid setting, it's just going to be a better option for DPS, as we already just went over, so it's going to be more versatile. And then in activities with match game modifiers, Arbalest's exotic perk always allows you to one-shot shields, so you never need to restrict your loadouts to account for all shield types. Something I also didn't even mention was the perk Disruption Break, which also gives a 50% damage increase to kinetic weapons against an enemy after breaking that enemy's shield. So Arbalest could technically hit way higher DPS on enemies that do have shields. Overall, I think Arbalest is still a very clear winner. It seems to beat out Wishender in every single category other than ammo economy, and I know comparing the DPS of a special to a primary is also kind of biased, but it is an important factor to keep in mind when going into endgame activities, especially with loadout restrictions. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments below, and which of these 2 weapons you prefer to run, or if you just stick to regular primaries for anti-barrier. I do also stream a bunch over on my Twitch, so if you guys do want to watch some low-mans, speedruns, and other PvE challenges live, a link to that is in the description below, along with my Discord server if you want to come hang out over there. Anyways, that's all for this video, guys. As always, have a good one. Peace.